So I've asked our panel to try and keep it controversial, right? If possible. So here's your chance we're going to have a bit of a freestyle panel. There isn't much structure to it. We haven't planned anything, and it's just a case of us throwing a few questions at the panel. I'm going to ask our friends on the stage to introduce themselves briefly, because some of you may not have seen them yet, and some of them will be speaking later on. So welcome everybody to the beginning of the second session of the second day. Lots of interesting stuff still to be said before we close this afternoon. And welcome. Thank you. Big round of applause.
Okay, I'll get started. My name's James Stewart. I'm speaking in here in, I think, about an hour and a half. I was the co-founder of an organization called the Government Digital Service, which led a very large-scale transformation effort across the UK government. I was Deputy Chief Technology Officer for the UK and now a consultant with an organization called Public Digital.
I'm Hendrik Esser. I work for Ericsson, a very large telecommunication company, as a manager for special projects. And that means I'm a sort of in-house consultant trying to help all parts of the organization to improve. Okay, I think I'm done.
All right, my name is Linda Rising. I'm giving the closing keynote today. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which is Music City. That's not too controversial, but I did not vote for Donald Trump.
Well, you get a round of applause for that alone. But also for the wonderful music that Nashville makes.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's controversial or not, but the closing keynote will address controversy, and it will talk about talking to people who don't agree with you. So that might be controversial, I'm not sure. So.
Thank you.
And I am definitely sleepy. I just arrived yesterday, so I think it's the middle of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Mirette Kangas. I'm from Yle, Finnish broadcasting company. I live in Helsinki. And just an hour ago I had a presentation in this room, and I was sharing how we do this cultural change in broadcasting company. And the aim is, of course, to be relevant in this digitalization and how we adapt all this great culture thing in creative and knowledge work.
I'm Mark Schwartz. I am with Amazon Web Services. They call me an enterprise strategist there. I used to be the CIO of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in the U.S. government. So we got the U.S. government here, the UK government there. And we learned everything that we knew from the UK government. And to try to be controversial, I'm going to be speaking later this afternoon about why I think the product owner model is not a good idea. And I know a lot of the audience is product owners, by the way.
Fantastic. Well, it seems like we might have a bit of a flavor of a panel there if we've got, two individuals that have worked in the government or worked for government in the past, and it would have been cool if we had a couple of Greek representatives up there as well, because that would have been an interesting conversation, especially if one of the questions I might throw is, would you think that Agile might work in a government? Could a government work in an Agile fashion? Who wants to go first? Is Diomedes in the room? Can you come up here, Diomedes? Sit in the front, please. Can I ask you to come join me in the front? Diomedes Spinellis, everybody. Diomedes Spinellis is one of our most respected IT professionals in Greece. Was almost CTO type thing of the Greek government. I'm going to pull up a chair for you. Have a seat. I want to put you on the stage. Well, I haven't asked permission, but you know what? I'm going to anyway. I'm just going to do it because I love Diomedes so much, and I want him to be on this panel. Thank you. It's an honor, man.
You want to introduce yourself?
Who goes first?
Thought perhaps he should introduce himself, but apparently you all know him already. So the short answer would be yes. but what do we really mean by that? So the first thing that you learn when you step into working in a government is just how big and complicated they are, and how big and complicated their jobs are. They're trying to manage so many different priorities that move at different paces, that have different implications. And there's certainly been a gap in most governments of experimental mindsets, of iterative approaches to delivering services, and particularly around collaboration. Massively siloed organizations, both departmental structures and different professions within them. And there's no good reason that those things can't be taken apart and put back together. But I think there was some comments in the opening keynote about we need to be careful not to try and apply a single model to what we do, particularly in an organization that's that complex and that important. I think that very much applies in government. We need agility, but not necessarily a sort of adherence to the methodologies that we talk about as Agile in every place. And we also need to think within that kind of what do we mean by any of this, and what are the other things that we'll need to adapt as we make governments more agile. So for us, one of the questions that we always had was, where is the slowness of government a good thing? Where is the deliberative process that's democracy requiring some things to take a while and a certain amount of friction? I think there's a real risk that when we run into governments and start talking about agile, that we don't take that side seriously.
I think there's a response to...
So I'm just going to answer a different question.
Sure.
Okay, so most of my coding career was spent on very large projects. Mm-hmm. So the last one was the 777 airplane. And it was definitely waterfall and was definitely large. And I'm often asked, well, could the 777 have been developed with an agile approach? And the answer is no. However, the other thing you'd have to add was, could that project have been done better? And the answer is definitely yes. Could Agile have communicated anything that would have added to the improvement of 777? Could Agile have helped make 777 better? And the answer is definitely yes. So I think the answer is true, even though I don't have a government experience, it would be the same. Could government operations be improved? Yes. Is there a way that Agile can communicate some of the ideas or techniques or strategies that could help that process? Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to share that in Finland we have an experiment government program, which has been started 1 year ago, and now
in Greece too, you know.
Yeah, still, yeah. And question about can government be agile or not? I think that it's the same thing than in companies, that by experiments the culture is changing. And why not in governments too?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to build on that. It's tempting to exaggerate the difference between governments and companies. I think really the question is more about large enterprises versus small, nimble companies. A lot of the challenges that you find in the government, you find also in large enterprises, especially in heavily regulated industries. The government, the hard part that I found really is in the investment oversight part of things, where you might have, let's say, Congress has to authorize money, and you have to go through a planning process to get that to happen. But if you think about it, the agencies and IT have to answer to Congress, okay, but a company has to answer to its board of directors and its shareholders, which are essentially who supplies the money. So a lot of those concerns are replicated. If you're in banking or something, you have all sorts of compliance requirements, or in healthcare, HIPAA or GDPR or whatever it is. really, it's a lot of the challenges are similar. Government tends to be a little exaggerated, and I found it a very good place to try out new ideas because you're right away facing the most difficult possible environment.
Well, Diomedes, I know, tried a lot of awesome new ideas when he had his stint with government. I think he's going to give us some insights.
Three things. First of all, that government IT projects are under extreme pressure by being increasingly compared with projects that are done outside government in an agile fashion. And it's becoming more and more apparent that something is not working there. However, as others of you here in the panel suggested, government has to work within legally prescribed limits, especially in Greece, which follows a Napoleonic tradition of civil service, where it must do exactly what is prescribed by law. There are ways to work in a more agile fashion within departments. I've done it and I've seen it happening. The sad thing is that this is done in a way that's not legally prescribed, which means that if an individual that has been pushing for it is moved away, then this thing gradually can stop working. On the other hand, when we look at specific government projects, IT projects done by government, I think there's a huge room for improvement there. These can be performed in a more agile fashion instead of having huge specifications which are gold-plated in order to care for and foresee every eventual need and every requirement, to budget ahead some work that can be done in a more flexible way, to give work in small increments and see what can be changed and what is close to the needs of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Diomedes. I think we have a question.
Yeah, since I mentioned I had a question, you guys have hit on the topic a bit. I'm coming from the pharmaceutical environment, about 20 years, and bringing a true agile mindset and wanting to, give bring the best ideas to the tables. And wondering, in your experience, any of you who have worked in the regulated space, what have you found to be the most constructive approach to help them see things differently in a way that, they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know what may benefit them. So what have you found to be the most constructive approach to help them sort of see through the clouds to, wow, if they have the courage or the vision to step in from a leadership level, what could be possible for them? In a regulated space, not pharma.
The 777 project, of course, is regulated. We should get down on our knees every night and thank God that it's regulated. Because if it were not, then people would be throwing in random C++ code, and who knows what would be the result of an airplane flying without any regulation. The same thing is true for the pharmaceutical industry. That's a very good thing that it's regulated. I want to make sure, as I cannot in the United States with vitamins, for instance. I have no idea when I buy vitamin C tablets whether there's any vitamin C in that tablet. Someone has just labeled it vitamin C, 100% of your required daily amount. I mean, I have no idea whether I can believe that label or not. So because it's a regulated industry in the United States, I can trust a drug that my doctor prescribes and that I buy in the form of a prescription. So you have to start with the fact that there's a very good reason why there's regulation in place, and we should embrace that. We should be happy that we have regulated industries and that there's, we don't want to get rid of it. So I think a lot of the fear for people in regulated industries is somehow they're going to lose what is a huge benefit for either avionics or the FCC communication or for any other regulated industry, the huge benefits, and they are not going to go away. So I think that's the fear that drives most of their decisions is what will happen to our regulated industry, our nice, comfortable regulated industry. And to begin with that, to say, well, we embrace that, we appreciate it, that's not going to go away. So start there.
So I'm not sure that I've been able to inspire people in a regulated environment. I think what has worked really well for me is scaring people in a regulated environment to change, because I think my current stance with when I go back and talk to the government, for example, about moving into the cloud, what I tell them is, if you're not in the cloud, you're not secure. You know, you're in big trouble. You better get moving. I think with when you do get a chance to sit down and have a rational discussion, a company that has big compliance requirements, they probably think that the status quo is okay right now, and they're complying just fine. But when you examine it, they're probably well out of compliance in a lot of areas, or have no good way to ensure that they're in compliance. And so I tell them, if you start using DevOps and you do automated testing and put automated controls in place and put them in place in the cloud, you'll really be sure that you're compliant. And right now you probably aren't. So I recommend using scare tactics.
Fear is the worst motivator for change.
Well, it depends on whether it works or not.
So the evidence shows fear is the worst motivator for change, so I would not recommend that. If you're going to come hear the talk at the end of the day, I'm going to address some of those issues. But it's, as I recommend it, beginning with commonality, what you have in common, what you both agree on, and taking small steps is a whole, there's a book of patterns about that.
I'd like to challenge that. You know, fear might be a bad motivator for change, but you know, with your back up against the wall, you certainly do become innovative.
Let me add something opposite to fear is letting people free to fail, encourage them to work and innovate. And sometimes in regulated environments, people hide behind the regulation, saying, "Oh, we cannot do that; it's prescribed." But when you look at it carefully, it's not, that part is not regulated. So if you encourage those people to come forward, to experiment, to try new things, tell them that it's okay, you can fail in this area, obviously not bring a 777 down, but maybe there are other areas where you can actually innovate. This can work wonders, but people living in such regulated industries often are fearful of change, and you need to act as a signal in order to let them free to innovate.
Just add, often you'll find that there are people who are working within the regulatory system who are more sensitive than anybody else to the ways in which that system fails, whether that's by slowing things down or by just not stopping the things that it's meant to stop. So one of the things that was really important for us early on in our work in government, which what we were doing wasn't heavily regulated, but there were lots of compliance rules we were expected to hit, was finding some people, particularly within the cybersecurity environment, who were responsible for enforcing the regime that we had, who knew that the old mode of delivering government projects was leading to all sorts of security failure, and that the mythology that had grown up around their processes was leading to security failure. And then bringing them into our team, working with them and helping them guide us back to what are the principles behind that process and what are the new ways we can express those principles. And that led into some very substantial security policy reforms. But it was finding those people who were already there, already frustrated, and making them part of our team that got us where we needed to be.
I think people generally, I'm an optimist maybe, but people want to do a good job. They want to do the best job ever, every day. And I think this is a potential you can leverage on when you nurture these kind of things. Because people also, when they want to do a good job, they have certain pain points they want to overcome. And when you are starting, and that's a leadership thing, starting from there, acknowledging these pain points and leaving the space for people to overcome them, start thinking together how to do that, then I think you get the momentum.
I have comments for this fear topic. So at my working place, we are now having workshops related to fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And if you have fixed mindset, you have used to do things certain kind of, and you don't necessarily are allowed to do new things. And it also makes limitations what you do and how do you proceed of things. And to get people involved to discuss about this growth mindset, what does it mean? For example, how do you behave? How does this reflect to our organization or how we are leading or such kind of things? It's a nice thing to start to having conversation about the possibilities.
I'll take the opportunity to do a little rebuttal of Linda's claim there. I think I wouldn't be the first person to say that sometimes it helps to have a crisis that makes things urgent. And one of the most useful opportunities that I had in the government, actually there were two, one after another. One was the big failure of healthcare.gov. I don't know if everybody's familiar with it, but pet Obama project that didn't go very well in implementation, partly because it couldn't scale. And
even after he got onto the show with Zach Galifianakis and say, the between two ferns things where he was plugging healthcare. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it became the albatross, the thing that couldn't be escaped. I think it was a great opportunity to say to people who were resistant to any change, look what happens if you don't use something scalable like the cloud. It's time to move in that direction. We also had that great incident where all of my personal information was stolen by the Chinese government from OPM's computers. You could look at that as an opportunity because now there's a really good backup of our data in China in case we ever need it. But it was a great opportunity to say our security is not working the way we're doing it now, and it's a really good idea to move on. But I think the real clarification, what I'm getting at, is that I wanted to change the risk equation where a lot of people thought it's very risky to do these new things. And my message was, no, it's risky not to do these things. So more a matter of the calculation in advance as opposed to actually managing people during the transformation. So perhaps we agree a little bit more than it sounds like.
Well, it's boring.
Okay. Yeah, first I'd like to say to the audience that a couple of years back, I had been involved in a Greek government Agile project, the first one. Yeah, so unicorns do exist. And I think the product owners may be somewhere here. Byron over there, Byron Georgadopoulos. So my question is, a lot of people say that Agile has passed the peak on the hype cycle. Do you agree with this statement? And if yes, what comes next?
It's crossed the chasm? Is that what you're saying?
It's crossed the peak of the hype cycle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because
well, it's becoming. There was a comment earlier on by one of the speakers about the commoditization of Agile, and so the hype is now.
Okay, that's not what I was going to ask. I can answer a different question, but.
So, have we seen the peak of the hype cycle? I'm not sure about that. There's definitely a lot of disillusionment on the planet around agility, and that is pretty much because a lot of companies have tried to adopt agile methods, agile scaling frameworks. They have learned new recipes, and they are wondering why is nothing changing. And the reason is that the agile mindset is not being spread in that way. So I think, yeah, definitely the hype cycle is over when it comes to agile methods. But for agile mindset, we are by far not there, I think.
Well, I think same like that. And there is also new demand for leadership, new kind of skills to learn. Actually, leadership now and future is facilitator more than it used to be. And it's not quite, let's say, it might be the new thing for quite many leaders. And also we who are working as a change agents and consultancies, we can help leaders because we don't want to scare them to saying that, hey, why don't you behave like this? Instead of that, we can really help them so that they can feel safe also.
I'll happily take one or two more from the audience before I release our panel. Yes.
My question is related with the government projects. So, based on your experience, how important is to change the mindset of the public employees, especially for US and UK, because we are Greeks and we know the mentality of the Greek public sector employees. So how difficult is, based on any agile methodology, to influence all these people to make their work more meaningful for themselves and the society? Thank you.
I'll start. There were some challenges in getting people to change, and it was fascinating what those challenges were to me. What I found was that employees didn't believe that we could actually do the things that I was asking them to do. You know, they said, well, somebody's going to stop you from doing that. You know, you can't be agile here. And I actually had to do a lot of selling to employees, essentially, and convincing and making the case that we would be able to do something, and then showing them that we could. The flip side of that, which is the big opportunity, is that there was a lot of frustration there already. You know, people were very used to the idea that, let's say the software developers were used to the idea that they would write a bunch of code, and then all of a sudden somebody from the QA department would jump up and say, you can't deploy that, you know, and then somebody from the security department would do the same thing, and then the oversight body in our parent agency would jump in and say, oh no, that's no good, you can't do it, you know. It was just like one impediment after another for people. And so actually getting the thing moving was easy. Not easy, relatively easy. Once I convinced people that I was going to get the things they were frustrated with out of their way, and that made a really big difference. That released the energy and the good ideas.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, getting the right people lined up to support what we were doing was crucial, and was where a lot of the work went. We really didn't need everybody on board to do what we were trying to do. We needed enough people, and we needed the right people. I think very rarely would I bring up Agile in a conversation with somebody new I was meeting in government. Generally, you try and focus on what problem are we trying to solve together? What failure have you observed that together we might be able to find a new way to fix, which is similar to a number of the comments earlier about how this works. And very often that would be with, say, people who are running call centers or answering phones in call centers or doing other frontline tasks. So that's where a lot of the knowledge in government about what works and what doesn't lives. And there you'd go, and people were very open very quickly on what I'm doing in my job makes no sense. I remember one really poignant conversation with a person whose job was opening letters that had been sent to our driving agency. And he said, you know, my job shouldn't exist. And if you're successful, my job won't exist. And that's going to be a problem for me, but it's the right thing. And that was such very, very moving. Emotionally, it can be difficult to deal with those kinds of things. But it was a reminder that so many of those people are so passionate about the services that they're trying to deliver. They may have seen plenty of projects fail and be cynical about projects, but the core services that governments are there to deliver, the people who work in government usually care very deeply about. And if you can tap into that, not make it about Agile, not make it about technology, make it about how can we make those services better, that's where you find the common ground.
And a final comment from the audience.
And adding to that, I think most civil service employees actually want to work in a more agile way. They want to be empowered. Very few start their day saying, feel very happy I have to do exactly A, B, C, D, and then follow this very rigid process. In a study we finished this year on e-governance in Greece, we identified heroes in a number of areas. people who came forward and moved in a more imaginative way, delivered things in an agile in a fashion that could be termed agile, because they wanted to do it on their own. Imagine how much different it could be if it was something that was actually encouraged at the government level.
Thank you all very, very much. I can only say that, after hearing those brief remarks and some of your questions, I'm more encouraged that as a shareholder of our government and a stakeholder within all the other governments, that there are there's more of an agile and open approach to many of these things. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing more of your talks later on. Diomedes, thank you for accepting to come down so quickly, and we shall see you in a little while. Thank you all. All right.